gonna get to the finish line on this situation,
Today.
come to a final decision. And the other thing I'd like to see is everybody,
It's a really hard week to be in education, so if we could all just take a moment of silence.
thank you.
Thanks. Let's hope that all of these things help us to focus on student-centered decisions, have known as option 3 from the last plan. Because I think where we as a board had left things prior to our last meeting was we felt that the educators primarily are the ones who wanted us to move towards a swifter solution, feeling that the conditions in the elementary schools right now were not conducive to optimal instruction or outcomes. Once we moved forward with that, and we started tossing around this other option, then they said, no, that's not what we meant. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel behind where we had progressed here. I'm gonna start out responding to her saying, I think that it's important for us to move forward because the next pieces of this are time sensors of developing construction plans and moving those plans forward to our architects and our financing area to prepare what needs to go to state education for approval and ultimately allow us to move forward with our next referendum. So really that ultimately needs to probably happen by the end of this school year, and that's not ideal. So we thought we had a ton of time. The time has chipped away. We spent a lot of time invested in outreach. So I would say the glaring things for me are what we're left with based on feedback. People have to be very clear and understand. Could get all of our buildings between 300 and 400 students or in that range. That addresses a lot of the day-to-day things that people talk about. Gym sizes, cafeteria sizes, hosting events, traffic patterns, parking, all of the things that are far more difficult at a larger school. And I think we have to really think about where we can and cannot do construction. And our last Pride Walk was Gansevoort. And for those of us that went to Gansevoort, I don't know if I have my last enrollment numbers with me, but I mean, they are packed. And that building is not an optimal layout now. Things are not, you know, there's kind of like, if you've never been to Gansevoort, like a raised ranch. Yeah. So they're pretty packed. I can't see that we would add any more kids or space to that. And I think we have to remember the constraints that we have at Ridge Mills. When we did the Pride Walk there, the gym coach said, like, I need a bigger gym. We can't give that to them. Mr. Flagg has said, I need more space. We can't add on. So those are the things that are glaring to me. So I'm interested to hear what the additional board members have to say. That the two plans that we have in front of us from the consultant are a K4, 5-6, with 2 5-6s at Bellamy Denty, or back to grade banding. Those are the two final recommendations they gave for anyone who didn't get through the 110 pages. So that's where we are.
Okay, thanks, Ms. Davis. Anybody else? Paul?
Okay, I see it a little bit different than Tanya did. I think the consultant, Ross Haber, has come forward after analyzing a whole bunch of stuff, which is why this document is so thick and a whole bunch of different options. And their recommendation, I think, has been that the best way forward for the district in terms of accomplishing doing it more quickly is the banding. It's still, that would not get us to anything that would be implementable in the fall, in this coming fall. Came up with, which is feasible to do something in the fall, is the other option that they quoted. And after our last meeting, I think we debated a little bit on what we wanted them to look at further, and I think that's what we asked them to do, and that's what they did in this, and they presented, and that is That is feasible, although it isn't easy because it essentially uses all the existing buildings. It doesn't do any major construction or anything to make it work. So whether or not it's feasible from the standpoint of the school district in terms of making something happen between, that takes a while. The unknown for me, or one of them anyhow, is the role that the FEMA Staley, the results of that, how that helps us going forward, whether that expedites anything or whether we can do anything relative to being compensated for the loss at Staley, whether that accelerates anything, I don't know, and I don't know if anybody does at this time, but we certainly have been talking to FEMA. The board hasn't, but the district has been, so we have something going on there. I personally like the banding model. I think that's long-term is the way to go for Rome. I think it makes a lot of sense given the diversity of our district in terms of geography and location of buildings and student demographics and all of that. You don't have to be on the school board or study very long to find out that our district and our buildings are very, very different. You know, I live in the town of Lee, which is north, and Stokes is a completely different environment from Gansevoort, for instance, which is 80% walking students in an inner city. You can't get too much further apart from that. Yet, both buildings are working with the same program. I mean, they're doing the same kinds of things educationally. And I think that's important. I think it's, and Ross, they have put some time into analyzing these different educational aspects, in particular the new standards and the way they break down by grade levels. And we've been following that on the educational side for some time in terms of early literacy and the break points for where things happen and the changes in the way students are educated in the K2 or K3 realm versus the higher grades, the higher elementary grades. So I think that's all consistent, and I think it's a bit of a struggle, even if you're on the board, especially for anybody else, to kind of put all that into a mixer and say, okay, well, that's obviously, because it depends a lot on what your criteria are. You know, if you're really interested in doing something nearer term, then there's some options that are more suited to doing that. If you're interested, I don't know, but I think as a minimum, as a school board and as a district, we have to admit that our district is very diversified. You know, we've heard a lot about equity and trying to make things more uniform. Not easy, that's easy to say, but it's very difficult to do because we're very different, and big portions are very different. And with the current 8 elementary buildings, 8 can't really carves up the districts in a whole bunch of different ways. Well, the way it's done currently is it's kind of a default from over the years of closing schools and picking and adjusting catchment areas to the point where, you know, school A has sort of a catchment area over here, except that they reach out over here or they include that, and over time they change. And Ross did something which I didn't completely understand. I was kind of sorry that he's not here today to explain it, but early in his presentation, he talked about creating what the district looks like in terms of building populations and catchment areas. And to kind of quote him, what he did is he looked at the school directories to figure out who belonged to a given school, and then they mapped that geographically onto a map. And so these were the students that belonged to School A. And then he mapped the students. And the students mapped differently. And so what we found out, more than at least I appreciated, was the fact that all of our catchment areas or all of our schools contain large numbers of students that don't physically reside within that catchment area. And that catchment area is not precisely defined, so it's a little iffy, but that's the way it is. And there's a reason for that, and I won't go into that. I think most of us know how we got there. But if we back out of that and we talk about 6 schools or 5 schools or pairing of schools, and then we get back into using that data and how those schools pair up and what their catchment areas look like, and then how well that is supported by the school in those areas. So it's a very, but I still think that the banding is the secret to it, because the banding allows us to pair our schools and get a large enough chunk of our district associated with a, quote, school or a pair of schools, that it can be representative of what we're looking for in terms of the diversity and the equity across it. To do otherwise, our schools remain pretty much individualized. And some of them are much more wealthy than others, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's where we are. I would like, personally, for us to try to do something for the fall with that option, at least to investigate it further, since it does use existing facilities and isn't dependent on construction and other things. If we don't decide to do that, then it's more long-term.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty.
I just want to follow up on page 4, but Paul reminded me that we have to think about the goals that we started with, and page 4 of this presentation was a good reminder of that. And the 4 goals were: the redistricting will establish a redistricting model that best realizes the district's educational vision and direction, create the conditions that promote equity across all elementary schools, prioritize space for and promote professional learning opportunities, and be in service to supporting the whole child. So I had a brief conversation with a couple of the members-elect after one of our last meetings, and I just want to make sure that people are still clear, because I hear this repeatedly. This is not just about replacing Staley. That's not why this dialogue started, and just building an elementary does not solve all of the educational crises that we were talking about all the way back to 2019 and really prior in this district. So keeping that in mind, some of the things that Mr. Haggerty reminded me of that. And I feel like people wanted the answer to that question, so. Thanks, John.
Yeah. Mr. Blake, the 2019 redistricting plan, can you briefly explain to us what that was?
So that plan was intended to move away from Staley and build an elementary school to replace that building, better redistribute the students and realign the schools. We were going to go to recommend a K2-3-6 model to align to the standards. And so we were down to the part of, we were really about to do our first public presentation on the direction we were going, and then COVID happened, and that kind of put the kibosh on all of that. So, but with the intent of the model was twofold. One was to address Staley, and we knew at that time that it was not worth putting money into the building because it was so far out of building code that it would cost double to triple to renovate that it wouldn't be a new building. So the thought was to renovate Clough, or we talked about both Clough and Turn Road at the time. We had 2 different options that were being explored. I believe at that time the plan landed that we would move forward with the Clough site because of the new developments being built right there and wanting to have that space for those kids to be able to walk to that school with all the new housing that was in that region. And then the K2-3-6 because of the standards realignment and essentially trying to bring the supported learning services from different pocket buildings into each school, so those kids could stay in their school community and not have to be bussed across the city wherever there was space for their program, whatever that program was.
Okay. Now, you're talking about the standards. Question I have now is, you said K2, 3, 6, and there's been a lot of talk bandied about K4 or K5. That doesn't really mesh with what the standards are. How do we get around that if we ultimately go that way?
Well, I would say that, not every school in the state or the country is gonna go to a K2, 3.5, 3.6 model, whatever it is. That's just and we might be one of those. It's no different than what you're doing now. You're simply, your teachers will teach their curriculum at their grade levels, and your principals will be experts at more than just a smaller section. If you break up your elementaries a little bit, it simply allows your principals to be better instructional leaders. I only have to worry about 3 grade levels and making sure that my 3 grade levels worth of people are doing what they need to do for those kids, and I need to worry about really one instructional modality versus if I am, and then 3.6 or 3.5, same thing, different, a little bit different level, versus the way it is now. They need to be a little bit better at everything, and that's possible. We're doing it now. There's no reason why we can't continue to do it. It's really, like we talk about all the time, we can find any kind of a person to come stand here for an hour and tell you why you should do K2, 3, 5, and then we can bring somebody else in the door, we'll tell you the polar opposite, and you'll leave here wondering what you just spent 2 hours of your life doing. So it really boils down to preference and what people can be comfortable with digesting. And circumstances have changed, so there's no doubt about it.
Okay, thank you. Want to keep going on the line there, Joe?
Well, I mean, just listening with Paul, the last part of your comment, I'm not so sure is such a great idea in terms of, pardon me if I misinterpreted what you were saying, but it seemed like you were saying maybe we should, implement a plan, whatever it may be, in the fall to see how it works, and then if it doesn't work out, we can switch back. Is that kind of what you were intimating, or no?
No, I was saying that, and this is pretty much what Ross said, is that starting with that plan, it was, you could grow that out into the final configuration, but you could start something in the fall that would involve, the existing schools, basically what we asked them, the 5 K4.
Right, to alleviate some pressure.
Yeah, and,
Well, I mean, and Peter, correct me if I'm wrong in terms of what your position is on this. The short-term situation has been resolved for next year, as far as your concerned.
That would be where I would stand on it. We've already started working with teachers on assignments for next year, getting them prepared to know what they're gonna be dealing with in September. I think any kind of a change in that would just be not good for our mental stability. Not that we can't do it, but I don't think it would be a wise decision at this time.
Right, so, I mean, we've been
Yeah.
able
Pretty
to
late
work
in
it
the game.
out through a solution involving staffing
Yeah,
solutions rather than
we've
building solutions.
had a lot of good conversations with the teachers associations. We've done some reallocation of staff to make sure that buildings that have more students than anticipated, larger class sizes, have opportunities for team teaching. We've done, the board created some new positions last week to kind of help with some of the support services. Shifted our some supported learning models so that kids in grades K1 that might need kind of the least restrictive type of supported learning, special education, can stay in their home schools next year for the first time. So we'll have that kind of filtering in. So kids from Stokes won't have to be bused to Bellamy or Stokes all the way down to Denty. So we're starting to phase in that kind of, setting that stage for whatever happens officially in 4 to 5 years. But I think for right now, as things stand here today, they look pretty good for September. I can't tell you what happens in September if all of a sudden there's 40 houses in that development over by Clough and 20 of them are occupied with families. It's just, our class sizes right now are lower than they've been all year long because students have left the district. But in January, February, it was the opposite. We had kids coming in droves. We were registering 10 to 15 kids a week and class sizes were really getting tight. So it's,
But to that end, everything right now is being used as a classroom, and there's no peripheral spaces, and we would have no relief for that.
we don't have much relief right now. We have a couple of locations that we're trying to see if we can squeeze another space out of with some creative work and ideas. We are still awaiting for SED to sign off on the leasing of auxiliary spaces, so all of that groundwork has been done. We've had the engineers out here to look and make sure we can carry the electrical load, that our water is okay to be able to run out the water and everything out to the locations. They gotta have a bathroom in them. We've done all the prep work. We're just waiting for State Education Department to say, you're approved, go ahead and order them and get them on site, so. And that's been waiting since September. We had that paperwork into them.
I mean,
That includes the auxiliary buildings and that?
Yes, yeah.
I just don't, I get that we've been at it a long time, and a year has passed. And, you know, there were some delays, some understandable, maybe others not so much, but at this point, I still feel like, I don't wanna adopt a plan just for adopting a plan's sake either. You know, I mean, I just don't wanna say, okay, I just wanna kinda tie up some loose ends before there's a changeover and just move on with this plan. I think we have a little bit more time than maybe we think we do in terms of trying to make this decision. But, you know, I'm still grappling with really what is the best solution. I think at this point, it's all really speculation. I mean, whatever we end up doing here, I think it's just ultimately gonna be a best guess as to whether or not it's actually gonna improve you know, performance by our students in terms, because you looked at the models and there's really no definitive one where it says this is the best one to go with, and, you know, Paul's right. I mean, we have such a diverse district, you know, with the buildings and the students themselves, it's just very difficult to figure out which plan, if implemented, is gonna be the best one. My focus has always been to try to identify the plan that's going to give us the most space and the least amount of bodies in a classroom. And, you know, because right now, that's a problem, and we need to reduce class sizes, and we need to make sure that we don't have to bus our special ed kids to particular schools. We would like to keep them in our in their home districts, and we don't want to have art on a cart and, you know, art and music teachers splitting time between buildings. We want them enclosed within their own buildings. So, I don't know. And we had a vote recently, and like it or not, it was a referendum on how we've approached this subject, and I think we need to respect that as well. And I think that an opportunity should be given to those that the voters told us, you know, should have a voice at the table. So, you know, I don't know. I'm not normally a waffler. I like making decisions, and I like moving forward with things, so this is really, really bothering me. But right now, I do feel like I'm being, you know, kind of, like we're just doing this, again, just for the sake of making a decision, and I don't know that that's
Well,
really right. And we still don't have a lot of consensus here at the table, I don't think, in terms of which model we should adopt. I mean, I may be
wasn't-
wrong with that, but I mean, I still get that sense.
I wasn't suggesting that we sprint to June 30th. Not at all. I'm thinking July is probably when we'll have a final decision. So if that's what you're thinking, what this meeting was all about, it's not.
Okay, well, no,
We're just trying to go
Right.
forward, trying to hear what
Right.
everybody had to say, so we
No,
kind of.
and again, I'm not trying to accuse anybody of that or trying to pressure me in any way. Believe me, that's not what I'm trying to say. I just feel like, you know, we have not reached a consensus on this, and it's good that we're here to discuss it.
I
And
guess
honestly,
the question I have is, like, what more are we gonna learn that we don't already know as far as what's gonna be the best decision?
Well, that's
Like,
good,
what more
and that's
are
a
we
fair
gonna
point.
learn?
That's a fair point.
I mean, it's like beating a dead horse. I mean, we've looked at everything. And we've had somebody else looking at everything too.
Right.
So-
Lisa, you were in the room that night too, right? It was you, me, John, and Joe? Were we the four with the teachers?
Yes.
And that was why, in the end of March, they said, please make a decision in early April. They needed to know.
Yep.
Well, I
And
think
so
that was
now-
more for the short term.
Well, that was just
Rather than
every,
the-
I think
so,
for everything.
no, well, so I've talked to some of the RTA members since then, and they said, the longer you drag this out, it's the ambiguity and the not knowing that makes our job so hard. So whether it's next year or 2 years, like, it's the not knowing that is causing so much frustration for them. So that is a reason. And I would have to say to you, we went through this once in this district, and I won't stop mentioning that. And what people vote for is no change, even though it looks like change. It's the fear of change, and Kara has brought this up repeatedly in her emails and in conversations to us and said, every case that people bring forward is ambiguity. It's not something they've experienced, it's just what you said, it's a what if. But the things that we do know is prior to this, we were struggling with K-6, it's why we opened the dialogue. We were struggling with overcrowding. We are struggling, if you look at our STAR data, with reading outcomes. You know, we do have some tangibles that we know prompted the conversation to begin with. And change is hard and change is scary, but I think it's scarier to stay stuck where we are and not make a choice that benefits kids. And that's getting building and class sizes down. But everything we brought forward, someone hates.
I don't think that there's one person on this board now or incoming that doesn't believe that there needs to be a change to the current model. You know, because it is unsustainable. It's not working in terms of what we want to see. And the things I mentioned earlier, class size, and having children attend, their own zones, and the programs, and just the overall space. So I think that there is going to be a change, and I think everybody recognizes that, to the current model. But exactly what it is, I think we're still up in the air on that as to what truly is the best way to move forward.
But again, I ask, what's gonna change in 2 months? Like, what are we gonna learn that's gonna be like the epiphany? Oh my God,
I don't know
that's right.
that I need an epiphany. I just don't think, you and Karen may agree on a model that you think is the best. And I don't know that we're gonna get a majority feeling on just one of the options. There's so many options that have been presented. I don't know that we're gonna get to a point where we're gonna get to maybe a majority, but a very slight majority. I think that there's still a lot of different feelings as to which model represents what we want to do here.
Don't you think the reason that we're so conflicted is the model that was being recommended to us by an expert is the one that everyone hates the most?
Yes.
And so we feel pressured to decide something else, and we came in two meetings ago.
Yeah,
And
I
2
think that's
meetings
part of
ago,
it.
we thought, okay, we had found reasonable compromise, and then option 3 came at us, and we were like, oh wait, well now that little voice is in the back of my head of teachers saying, help us, help us, help us, we're drowning. So we did, and they were like, I feel like that's all of my life in Rome, New York. Do something.
But I also-
and as soon as
But
we
I
want to
don't
do
think-
something, yes, that's
feel
not
like
bad.
they don't want 2 5-6s for the simple fact is, yeah, our budget looks great right now, but what happens down the road in 5 years, and we have to lay people off, and now we're sharing staff. I don't think they want.
That's no
Peter,
different than
can you
K4,
speak to
right?
that a little bit? Whether it's 2 5-6s or 2 middle schools or whatever, can you talk about how you feel that plays out if
So
there's
if it
some
was
sort of
2
a budget?
5-6 and like 2 6-8.
Or
just
2 5-8.
Or just
2 5-8s was
2
the
5-8s or 2 6-8s?
one that really caused the.
And
I
we
would,
do
I would say for
K5s?
staff-wise, you're not gonna carry that many more staff than you have currently because you have the same number of kids. You're gonna have you may have a few more music teachers, art teachers, phys ed, because of the amount of time you have in the building. Your large costs will be in, depending on how, do you wanna go full 2 sets of modified sports? Do you wanna go full,
Right.
2 sets of all that stuff? Do you wanna do 2 middle school musicals? If you do, that's okay. If not, then the kids from one school would go to another school and they would join up. Those costs aren't astronomical, but at the middle school, at the middle school level, that 6-8, 5-8 level, it's not gonna be a drastic amount of difference in total number of staff. Where you're gonna see your cost increase are gonna be your custodial staff, because you got an extra building. So you need, and depending on the size of the building, you wanna staff your custodial team based on square footage of the building, that's how many custodians you need. You're gonna, your outdoor folks, your grounds people, you're gonna have to mow more lawns, plow more parking lots.
What about the
That's the same number
RTA
of
concerns
sorry.
about, what about the RTA concerns with respect to splitting up like staff duties.
Again, that type of stuff, that can always come into play, but it comes into play in your special area subjects, you know, can you do away when a music teacher retires, can you share a music teacher between buildings? Can you do, you know, share a phys ed teacher or an art teacher based on your student populations? Can you have a split? I would say right now, it would all be like your speech, your OT, your PT. You can't split your classroom teachers. You're not gonna have them traveling between buildings because you set your schedule based on what you have. Could those things happen down the road? They could. Right now, a lot of that happens because we have a ton of openings in some of those support areas that there aren't certified people to take the job. So you have your OTs and PTs and your speech teachers traveling between buildings because you gotta cover the required services. Those things happen.
So listen, I get the RTA concerns about the two-school system. But what you said at the beginning of your remarks is what I'm focused on and why I like the model the best. Okay, that's where I'm at. It offers more opportunity for kids to do things in this district. If you're talking about 2 modified sports programs, I mean, that's that many more kids that are gonna be, you know, able to participate off the streets, you know, getting involved. And it develops a healthy competition. Like I said, I can only speak to the experience that I had, you know, growing up with the Staley-Stroud situation. And, you know, one of the most anticipated events of the year, every year, was the Staley-Stroud football game. And it was just one of those things that was a huge community event. And you had double the amount of kids involved in playing in these sports and competing. And, you know, and you can now apply that to pretty much anything, you know, that the kids are doing now, whether it's clubs or other sport and other programs. And so while I can respect the RTA's position on this, if it means that it's gonna benefit the kids that much more and double their opportunities, then I'm sorry, I'm gonna choose the children over the RTA any day of the week. And that's why I really felt that when we kind of initially discussed that 5-8, it doesn't have to be 5-8, I think probably it'd be more appropriate to do a 6-8 and keep it a K-5 situation. I just felt like we had addressed a lot of the concerns. It limited the amount of transfers that we were gonna have. I mean, you know, because we were concerned about kids, you know, having that extra transition to a different school. So if we do that 5-6, then you're talking about 4 transitions rather than 3. And, you know, so it addressed that concern. And, you know, and I think that when we looked at some of the numbers that Ross had provided, I don't know that we necessarily did a straight 5-8, but I think it was something similar. And I think the numbers were the lowest in that particular.
He did 2 5-8s.
Did he do 2 5-8s?
Yeah,
Okay.
It was 2.
Right, so if you look at the, if you look at the numbers and the space in that particular model, I think that particular model offered the most space and the least, or the smallest class sizes. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Joe and I agree.
Really?
I said, it was my idea. I was the one who suggested it.
Okay,
Okay,
listen.
so we agree.
You know, okay.
But
I'll
my
give you a hug
problem-
afterwards.
Okay, thank you. I gotta leave at 7, so don't think I'm being angry when I
No,
leave.
no.
I have to leave at 7. So, but I just,
Karen, have you been taking comedy classes lately? The past few weeks?
oh, I got
I'm
you.
rubbing off on her.
But
I've been sitting next to her too long.
what's bothering me, and I'll say my piece, is that we're not doing anything for September, and that bothers me. It really does. I can't get over that. So if we're not doing anything in September, then we can just keep having this conversation. You know, because we're not doing anything in September. So we decide what we're gonna do. But
So Peter, to your point about
Not doing
the
anything. I don't wanna
maintenance, so 2 of these plans are 7 buildings, and 2 of these plans are 8 buildings. And this one is the twin to, so this one, even though it says, page 77, if anybody else has theirs, the one of the K4, 5-8 as you're talking about, you could really look at this same configuration, whether you went, all these are K4s and 2 5-8s, or all these are K4s and one's a 5-6 and a 7-8. There's these 2 buildings, it's the same number of students, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, this one is the one that realistically gets your elementaries. down, right? So Stokes is 263 kids, Gans is 316, Denty is 400, they have 600 and something kids right now. Bellamy, 336, I don't think they've ever seen that many kids. But it leaves room in that building where there's
Although,
a lot of.
I mean, we'd have to come up with another building that's the middle school.
Well, no, this would be bringing Clough back online and Turn Road and using Ridge as the pre-K.
Is Clough a realistic
All
site
these.
for a middle school, Peter, in your estimation?
No, Turn Road and Straw would
Turn
be the
Road.
two middle
It'd be
schools.
the
Oh, Turn Road.
And the rationale for that was, one of the things that you were saying, you already have athletic fields there, so all your modified sports could play there, because that's what we lost in the Straw renovation project, was athletic facilities for the middle school. And then they would be able to work together.
Yeah.
To
But-
Danielle's point, the one thing that I think the teachers expressed that I have to say, so middle school has foreign language, home and careers, technology, the business classes, so that I feel like that could be a constraint if we lost staff and had to share. We're at 5, 6.
Well, if you're looking on page 77, Denty has one classroom available, so 19 classrooms needed, 20, so it leaves one classroom available. Then you look at Joy.
The second one?
Joy has
Not this one.
15 classrooms needed,
This one right here.
15 available.
But you have to go back and look, Danielle,
Seven,
when
seven.
he looked at those numbers later in the presentation, that's where he included all of the desirable spaces. So when he says available, he's already earmarked art rooms, music rooms, therapy rooms. So this is not what those buildings have right now. That's
What they have after
ideally
everything is-
to have all the fluff spaces we wanted.
I just wanna
Plus,
make sure that there would be room. if we
those
got
are already,
more.
I had that question for Ross 2 meetings ago, and those were already in the numbers.
But wasn't there
So-
concern at Stroud about
I haven't.
putting, yes, fifth graders and putting more kids, even when we talked about the sixth grade complex? People didn't want that, and people at Stroud were saying, well, you know, what about the shared areas? They might not be big enough, and.
Well, you're gonna have two buildings now. so-
1,300 kids in the
I
middle
understand
school is
that.
insanity.
You're gonna cut
Yes.
Stroud.
And
Yes.
remember, nobody's gonna be happy with anything that's decided
Listen,
anyways.
Right.
I think we already know that.
You already,
But-
right? I mean, so, it's,
So, two things that are almost a given that we're going after in this next referendum associated with whatever model is chosen. Stroud, unless you're gonna reduce it in student population, needs a cafeteria. It does not, the cafeteria does not support the 800 kids we got there now. So no matter what, however you put it together, if you're gonna have 800, 700 kids, we need a new cafeteria out of the next referendum. If you're gonna increase the population, maybe adding sixth grade, you need a new gym and a new cafeteria. So you have 2 gymnasiums. Those are all givens, okay? How that gets done, that's not my responsibility. We pay experts for that.
But that's if we put everybody at Stroud, right?
That's if you
Yes.
increase the population or keep it the same. If you don't, if you're gonna decrease it, like, if you go to 268s and you split that population in half, you got 600 kids in each 6A building, okay? If you go 5-8, you're not decreasing the population, you're gonna need a cafeteria. The other thing is, to Danielle's point, we have earmarked to go after additional spaces at the remaining elementary schools with the FEMA money. So we don't know that that's gonna fly, but we're gonna go after it. So we're going after every possible thing from FEMA that we can get, under the justification that every school has been impacted by the stately closure and the addition of students. So
Right.
when you say, yeah, Denty and Joy both look tight, we're talking about expansions of those buildings to add spaces for elementary STEAM labs, connected community school rooms that can be set up for the community and for the students. Like, we're looking to do everything we possibly can with that FEMA money. I don't know if we're gonna
How
get
many years
everything we
would that
ask
take?
for.
that's the
It's gonna
problem.
be a 4-year project. By the time you get your referendum, then you get your SED approvals on all your projects, then you gotta go out for your bids. I mean, it's
Too
construction.
long.
Right, I don't think you
It's
can
a
do work
4-year
on
process.
8 buildings
My
or 7
opinion.
buildings
It is.
in that
It's
time.
too
I think
long.
that's optimistic. I think you'd be talking
5, 6.
10 years by the time you know
Right,
it.
the option is here, that's why that option is there.
Right.
Not doing something in September just to me is.
I mean,
is-
and
is-
just-
We're sacrificing a lot.
We are.
If we're doing nothing in September, we're sacrificing a lot. That's just my opinion, and I'm gonna stick
I
with
agree.
it.
But I don't know that we are doing nothing. We are doing something, and we.
Well, we're doing
and it may-
something, but
and it
we're
may-
not-
And it may
it's-
just be, you know, the temporary answer that
The
would
temporary-
work if the long-term answer is really a good answer rather than,
No,
you
I
know.
understand, but
Well,
we've got
could-
money right now, it's good.
But remember,
These numbers are huge.
remember, the last meeting we had, I think you said that, we could do the 2 5-6s in the fall, remember? And you said it would significantly decrease
That was what
using
you guys
Bellamy
asked-
and Denty.
That was the model you guys asked Ross to put
Yes,
together.
yes.
Right,
That's
but
what
you
we're
just
doing.
said it's
Nobody-
not, it's
yes,
not.
but
advi-
no-
I wouldn't
Nobody-
recommend it, it's so late in the
It's too
game
late.
now.
Too late,
That
in my
was,
opinion.
that was weeks
But
ago
nobody
when we
would
asked for that.
know.
We just
Okay, but
haven't
what
had
if
it
it was your
back.
plan
Yeah.
for the following year?
That's the.
I'm talking about.
I know.
As I said the last meeting, I wouldn't make it your plan, period, if it's not your permanent
For the
plan.
long term.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't do
I
it as a
wouldn't-
stopgap for
wouldn't
2,
set it
4,
as a
7
long-term
years, I wouldn't do
plan.
it. If it's not your permanent
We're not gonna
plan,
do this
Okay.
again
I
in
wouldn't
like
go
2 or
through it.
3 years.
if that's if it's the permanent answer, then yeah, let's
I
go
know.
for it.
Well, yes,
I'm
and I
good.
think that's what he was thinking, and then you
Moving
just
forward.
slide in once you
Yeah.
get everything together, yes.
Yeah, that's.
Yes, that's.
Pretty much spells it out in here.
Yes, that's what they were thinking.
So my other thing is also in all of these plans, I'm looking at the special education children in every single elementary school who are constantly being moved because we don't have, and Peter, you can correct me, do we not have enough special ed teachers so that they can stay in their,
Don't have the rooms.
we don't
Yeah,
have their rooms?
it's the
Okay,
rooms,
because
yeah.
that's a huge issue also, and that is
It's been
something
changed for
that
4 years.
is to my heart is the fact that we're moving these special education kids around so much who have to be on a regimen, who have to have a daily schedule, and they get used to teachers for 3 or 4 years, and then all of a sudden they're moving again, and then they're moving again. So I just want to make it clear that we're keeping them in the loop too, as we're doing all these moves, because that's a lot for them.
I think the maps have those room colored out, don't they? I think those were in there.
So, I mean, what do you guys think? We all down at the
I
other
know.
end
You
of the
haven't
table
talked yet.
there.
I like 2-6-8s. I like the idea of, Levi's about to move up in his little ceremony for 6th grade. I think it's special for the older kids. I think that doing just a K4, I think 5 is still too young to move into junior high with 8th graders. And if we can add on to the buildings, I think that's great as well. I really love the sports piece only because we give our kids everything. They have every single program, everything. Teachers stay after for help. They do whatever that they can for the kids, but the kids just aren't buying in. Our attendance is low. They're not buying in. I feel if we give them something more as far as a reason to come to school to get excited, like when we were younger, and looking forward to sports and things like that, I think.
I'm not trying to fight that battle. I'm just not. The other one, the 2-5-6s, I'm never like that. Initially, when we were talking about it, I think show us something that was 1-5-6, 1-7-8, and what we got instead was 2-5-6s. I don't like that either. What I would support would be K4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and I might also support K4 or K5, 6, 8. My only problem with 2-6-8s, I do like the whole rivalry. I was around during that time. I was Staley versus Stroud. I love the idea. I think it's great. However, I still don't feel that 2-6-8s are going to put us number-wise where we need to be in the elementary schools. I don't think it will. I don't like the idea of 2-5-8s. I have concerns about Stroud. We already know that, holding that many children, and I don't like the idea of 5th graders in school with 8th graders. I just don't. And that's where I stand.
Thanks, Lena.
You know, I think the one advantage of the 5-6, it should be obvious, is that the buildings already exist. You know, we're just reconfiguring them. 5-6 is an elementary school, we have 2 large, and that's one of the things that made it, you know,
Palatable.
quick, you know, or, you know. So it's not a middle school, you know, it doesn't address any of the athletic, some of the stuff that was mentioned, but it does address the, you know, spreading, you know, try to reduce the class sizes. I mean, grade banding does the best job, right? Because it averages everything out over large numbers of, large areas, but
I would agree
for
with
some reason,
Elena.
nobody likes it.
Yeah.
Well, I think the thing is to, like, for me, the grade banding, we have our standards, right? So now we're going to next generation standards, and who knows in like 5 or 6 years if the state decides they're gonna switch it again. So I don't wanna base my decision on the banding with standards because of that. Because who's to say if they increase it, okay, now we're gonna go K3, 4 or 5, then 6 by itself, who knows? So I have always liked, and I will stand by it for as long as my oldest son was in school, I like the K4, 1, 5, 6, 1, 7, 8, and 1, 9 through 12. If we had to do 2, 5, 6, and we had to use one of these options, I'm okay with it, as long as the teachers are okay with it. They're the number one, it's not so much what the parents want right now, it's the teachers are with these kids 6 hours a day. They are the ones that are teaching these children. I don't think 5th graders should be with 8th graders, so I am not for the 5 through 8. 6 through 8, I'm still doing research on that. There's a lot of disadvantages to that academic-wise, I feel like, and the research that I've been reading about, so that's where I stand with my decision.
Peter, and I kind of was in your boat too, but you said something in our pre-meeting about that 1, 5, 6 would be too many kids in one building.
I wouldn't recommend it, not in today's day and age. The amount of, you spend more of your time trying to worry about student management than you do about education. So I think the smaller setting, that's why I would recommend 2, 5, 6s. There's a reason why we're asking for the 6th graders to be kind of moved away from the elementary level. You put all of them together for that first time. It takes to operate a building of 800 kids at that age level all together the first time. It takes some really, really, really special people very consistently. It can be done. There's no doubt about it. I don't know that it can be done consistently, and I would recommend if you have the ability to do 2 of them, that would be my recommendation, simply from the student management piece of it. It's less kids to worry about. Scheduling becomes easier. You have more opportunities to again, create more opportunities for kids at that age level. If you want to start getting them into the arts more, you start getting more kids involved in your STEM stuff.
We saw that in the past.
You can do either. All I'm saying is that when you put 800 kids at that age level together in one place, it is a lot. It's very easy to become a challenge.
Okay. Yeah, because my feeling was I like the K4. I think that gives you good, manageable numbers in all the elementaries. And then I like the 1, 5, 6, but you're swaying me that I could live with 2, 5, 6s. I don't like 2, 6, 8s. I don't know if 6 should be with the 7th and 8th graders. I don't know, because there's different ways that they learn. I mean, the 7th and 8th, they go between period to period, and the 6th graders really don't, for the most part.
Peter, you had previously expressed concerns about that too, way back in 2019, which were the teacher certifications weren't the same, and you can't share as many of the teachers. So I think that's how we ended up looking at 5, 6 together, because they are the
If
same.
you did a 6-8, you definitely have to do some form of an annex where your 6th graders are
Yeah,
segregated,
yeah, I
and
don't
your
like
that. Parents and the teachers
faculty,
hate.
Well,
your
and the
faculty is
certifications,
not
like,
together.
Yeah.
7th through
Yeah.
12th grade.
But they also hated that extra transition too. The K4 and then a 5, 6 and then a 7, 8 and then a 9,
But I
12.
think
Which is why
overall,
for
when we talked to everyone, the last meeting we had, I think everyone, if they had to agree to something, I think that was what most people agreed with, was the 5, 6. More people could agree with that than some of the other configurations, so.
And to the point that Danielle made, and a lot of the research I did as well, 6th grade, no matter what configuration you have, seems to be the most challenging year. And the other thing is, I have to tell you that the high school and the middle school teachers will tell you that when we had a 5, 6, so I'm repeating myself on this, but when you looked at all the research about transitions, there's two different types of transitions. There's one when you're all moving together as a cohort, like banding, right? Banding would have been your same group of K2 would then go on to that 3-5 or 3-6. So it's not like now where when we used to have Staley or now we have Stroud, you have 6 or 7 elementary schools and suddenly they're all in one big pond. So the stepping of that, when we went from 5-6 to 7-8, or if you would do that again, you're now still looking at the same cohort of kids. Those kids are already all intermingled. And the high school and the middle school teachers will tell you, those kids were far more prepared. And I know COVID played a factor, but even prior to COVID, 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20, when we had gone back to K6s, those kids were not getting to the 7, 8, or the 9, 12 as academically prepared as they were. There was more autonomy. I mean, Danielle and I had kids the same age, so we experienced them learning things about, how to walk in the hallways more independently, using the bigger restrooms, being in a bigger group of kids, all the things that Peter mentioned. It had the most robust music program ever. If anybody looks at our marching band and chorus and numbers like that, they're so far down now. Again, partly due to COVID, but they also went down a lot after that split out to the elementaries. So a lot of districts do 6-8, but I have to agree with what John just said. I don't see us really ever transitioning our 6 for it to be a true middle school. Our 6 would still kind of be caught in a limbo. So I'm with Danielle and Elena. I thought that was kind of the compromise option. In a perfect world, we would be the most progressive and go to banding, but in a compromised world, I think that the 5, 6, then 7, 8 works. I also did not think that 2 5 6s, like that really threw me for a loop when that came out.
Yeah.
But to Karen's point and Paul's point, it was the thing that was the most quickly implementable, that we would see the return of art, music, reading areas, cool down rooms, therapy rooms, all of the things we're missing right now, as opposed to having to wait another 3 to 4 years until we get something constructed. It would be a stepping stone to the long range. So,
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I thought it was gonna be 1, 5, 6. I was for that, but I mean, what you just said about the 2, 5, 6s, I mean, I think, that sounds like a good plan too, if you had to go with something. And I don't like the 5, 8s myself either, or the 6, 8, or the two separate buildings with the middle schoolers. But, I guess the 5, 6s with 2 buildings.
And I don't like I like the 2 5 6s, but I'm not sold on
2 5
Denti
8s or-
and. what was that,
Oh,
Bellamy.
Denti and Bellamy.
I don't like that.
well, put it on 2 different sides, right? So I think that's kind of where he
The
went with it. And
concept.
they are our
Yeah.
bigger buildings other than Joy.
I just don't like that, though.
Yeah.
That
You want
in
one?
grad,
Yeah.
yes.
And
Oh,
I
thought
think
that was regular.
just having been a
It's
parent
really
whose
is.
kids went through a lot of transitions because of our prior changes, and my kids coming through the whole school experience while we were doing all the other
Not it.
construction, the teachers make this work for our kids, without a doubt. And I think their safety and their security and their joy comes from the environment created in their classroom more than a building. And because Rome is 72 square miles, other than Gansevoort being our last walking school, or if we build a building at Turn Road, you would go back to being, Fort Stanwix was a highly walkable school. It isn't that your neighborhood makes your school, it's that your school becomes your neighborhood. So, when you're out in the further reaches of our district, those kids don't get to really see each other after school or hang out unless they live in a certain geographic area where, if you grew up going to Gansevoort, or you grew up going to Fort Stanwix, or you grew up going to Fort, DeWitt Clinton or Columbus, like, you lived near your classmates. Now it's your classmates become your community while you're in that school. So however we put them together, that's how they kind of forge their relationships.
If the board will indulge me, I'd like to ask our 3 members elected if they have any thoughts. Okay with
Cassie's like, so many.
that? Is it okay?
Cassie, you moved your seat first.
Is it
so
okay with everybody?
You get to go first.
I wrote in the notes, so I'm good. Yes, if you,
Sure.
Wait, we got a mic for you.
Coming in hot.
It's just for recording purposes,
One more.
I think. I don't think it's
Playing
gonna be
Tetris
amplified.
with chairs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carl.
Oh, wow. Right in there. Whew, that's hot mic. So I'm taking the advice just given and previously given to really listen. I think I said this at the panel for Meet the Candidates. I have my own personal opinions. They're my personal opinions. They're not for my board hat. So things that are important to me are hearing what our principals feel. They're really the administrators of the building, and I think that they have the overall kind of bigger district site that maybe the RTA may have because they're in the classroom, they're classroom experts. So I lean heavy on their opinions on what works best. I don't know. I don't really have an answer other than I definitely don't support banding. I don't like it for many reasons, and I love the idea of neighborhood schools. So I also don't want a lot of transitions because at the core I want kids to worry about being kids and not having to constantly have change if we don't need to incur it. So my non-answer answer is I don't really have probably a good opinion for you yet. But thank you for offering.
Thanks, Cassie.
Thanks, Cassie.
Yeah, hi everyone. Is this on?
Yes.
It's
just
recording.
It's for recording,
Yeah, it's not for us to hear you,
not for
it's for the
amplification.
Yeah, I think a lot of you guys make good points. There's a lot to take in, and I can't say that I have one specific solution that's going to solve all the problems today. But I think Cassie put together a great timeline to kind of take into account the stakeholders. I know you guys have already gotten a lot of feedback from the RTA and Ross, but personally, I would like to hear more involvement from the RTA and teachers, as some of you have already mentioned. And I know it might be a little bit early to bring in the architects, but that's one thing in the back of my mind. I want to know what's actually feasible as far as these buildings, because if you look at that 120 pages, he's talking about potentially additions to all the schools, to a new school with 2 renovations, one new school with 1 renovation. So I know that part's kind of a big question mark that nobody can answer now until we hear back from FEMA. But community schools, I think, is what the community and what the RTA has supported. So obviously, I would go along with one of those options that meets what the community is really looking for. Classroom sizes, I think, are also important, but it seems like most of these, changing the catchment areas, you can shift the lines a little bit to make room in different schools. So I didn't really see that in Ross's, besides when he split it up into the 2, 5, 6 schools. And he really seemed to move the different school districts, school catchment areas around a lot. But I like the idea, one, of adding on to Clough. There's space there, and a lot of space to add on, which could alleviate a lot of the overcrowding in the elementary schools. Also, with addition to Clough and a new school on Turn Road, I think you can shrink down some of the catchment areas. Between the students that are causing the overcrowding in the existing schools going to the new school and Clough. If there are any issues with certain schools, you can adjust the catchment areas to reduce it. So, say Bellamy now is very overcrowded and limited with space. Try to move that catchment area, move those students up to Clough or the new Turn Road, and make those adjustments to the catchment zones. And not just closing a school and moving it to a completely different location for a school. So I would like to have further discussions with the principals, the architects and the RTA and make a collective decision that can hopefully meet the needs, or most of the needs of all those stakeholders. And that's all.
Okay,
Thanks.
Jan.
John, are you familiar with some of the thought exchanges and that went on? You mentioned the stakeholders. We had a number of sessions where we got a lot of comments from a diversified group of,
I
parents.
wonder if he sees those, because his kids aren't in our district.
Yeah, I've went back and watched meetings from back in November till now, but no, I'm not privy to all the surveys. But in the February meeting, the teachers' survey, I think we're only presented 2 options. And the feedback that I got is they weren't really happy with either of the options. So we probably don't have time to go out for another survey, but definitely having another open communication forum to get that feedback would
Those
be
are
beneficial.
available in terms of, questions and answers, and it's very informative because it's kind of consolidated. You don't have to watch something for an hour. You can just go through, and you'll see themes that people have similar questions. So I would recommend.
You're talking about the survey with the individual questions, like professional development rooms?
Yeah, we had, Peter, we had, 3 or 4 different thought exchanges with different groups of people, and we collected a lot of.
There was different thought exchanges, and there was the live thought exchanges, and the one meeting we had 6 questions as a part of that. All that information is on the website.
Yeah,
Very
it's
open.
pretty interesting,
But
I
we
think,
can dig it out
to
and
look
get
through it.
stuff.
Yeah.
And the RTA just did a survey after we met with them in March and had our next meeting, and they had like 90% participation from the RTA, and 80% of them said 5, 6, 7, 8. So that was,
See, and I know,
we did ask them for that consensus, so just so we haven't not asked them.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
and-
what I was
yeah.
just gonna say. I mean, this is partly what's been taking so long, is that we've had meeting on top of meeting on top of meeting. We've had surveys. We've done all of that stuff. I mean, and we've talked to the architects. They've done their own presentations. That's why we're here in May and we haven't made a decision.
Yeah.
So, I know a lot of the stuff that was said was that we haven't really done anything. And, they need to hear more from the public or the teachers or whoever. But we've done that. So, and it's unfortunate that that was said, because, I mean, we've been doing this for quite a while.
Yeah, I think, I did, to answer your question, Paul, I did look over the surveys. Peter Blake was nice enough to share those with me. And it seemed like most of the concern was overcrowding. The teachers weren't as concerned about professional development space. With virtual options and being able to use flex spaces, offices, that was kind of low on their list. But mostly resolving the overcrowding and getting additional help, teacher aides or assistants or whatever solution they could. So when you're talking about this fall, I think some of you guys mentioned it, and Peter Blake mentioned it. I think the teachers are okay keeping it as is, as long as we can provide them some additional resources. Obviously, a new school is not going to be built by the fall. Shifting them around into different schools isn't going to be the answer for the fall. That's too much chaos, and no parent wants to deal with that, especially, like I think Joe mentioned, in 3 to 4 years, once you have a new school, change it again.
Well, just remember, we just did that to Staley and so
And that was a criticism.
we don't want to be insensitive to what we already did to families. You know what I mean? Like, they're bearing the burden now, and no one has come out to speak on their behalf, that those kids are all scattered to the wind. So that's a struggle for me to
Which
see.
families?
Staley.
Staley
Oh.
family.
The 600 kids because of the flood,
Yeah.
They moved in 2 weeks. No time is going to be easy to move, and Peter's the one who said this to us when we were kind of prepping this whole process. He said, no matter what happens in redistricting, families don't want to move, they don't like change, and kids don't, and teachers don't want to move
There's
from
going to
their
be
friends.
there's
and
going to be a
school
shift in 3 or 4 years when the new school's built. I'm just talking about this fall. There's no need to shift them around this fall.
No.
And then in 3 years again. That's all I'm saying.
The
not
only
doing that.
reason that we entertained that was because when we had a meeting with the teachers, 4 of us went, Joe, Lisa, myself, and John, they begged us for relief for the fall. And so that's what made us, when a week or 2 later, right, the first week of April, right after we came back from the
I
conference.
think it was the last meeting was when the 2 5, 6 on.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole reason that we started to entertain something for fall is because they said to us, we don't think we can keep going. But then they heard the option that would give them relief for fall, which did include bringing Clough back online. And I guess there's two sides to that. There's either rip the Band-Aid off and do something so that we are just continuing to move forward, or stay in limbo. And neither is perfect. Neither is perfect. I totally agree with you on that. But we wouldn't do that at this point. We would have done it if we could have come to a consensus probably before April 15th. But now, you're right, we're very late in the game to do anything now. But that came, yours telling us, ask the teachers, we did. We had a meeting in the Straw Auditorium and invited the whole RTA. So that came, and then right after that, they went and surveyed their whole membership. So to Lisa's point, we've asked everyone, like, we've given so many more
Options and chances for people to.
Yeah.
I just
yeah.
hate to see you keep going back because of all of the pieces that Peter has mentioned need to happen. If we don't get all of that, this certain wheel started, now you add another year on before you can do anything. And I
Yeah.
just don't know, in a year or two, are the same teachers gonna say, okay, we can't take it anymore?
No. I'm not saying slow down the process. I'm saying speed it up. So with I think you're right. You got most of the information you need. You can scope that down into an 8 or 10 week timeline. First, starting with a discussion tonight about redistricting. It's great to hear everybody's voice tonight and get your input, so you can see. So now, because this is the only place that you guys can really speak, so it's great that you're getting this out in the open, having this open discussion, because now you can see where your similarities are. Karen didn't even know that she agreed with you, Joe, until tonight. So this is good. So you're seeing where similarities are and differences, and it seems like you've even started to make progress. So now, either tonight or the next meeting, have an action to maybe scope it down to your top 2 or 3 options. And if you, as a board, can scope that down, then maybe vet that through the RTA. It doesn't need to be a separate meeting necessarily. It can be something quick, but vet that through the RTA just to make sure that they're on board. Next step would be run it by the architects, see which ones are most viable options, and then once you come down to that, if it's still the 3 options, the board comes to meet once again and hopefully have another open discussion and discuss which would be your best option to go forward. But I know that sounds easier said than done, but I think setting up a plan with set outcomes and hold ourselves as a community accountable to press forward. But I think that's all. In conversations I've had, people really want a strong community school, whether it's K through 5 or K through 6 elementary. I understand nobody wants to add on to Stroud, so the 6 through 8 is enticing, but having 2 separate 6 through 8, I just worry that you're not going to have the same technology rooms and same resources in each building. And it seems like 6 through 8 would be too difficult of a renovation at Stroud from what I've heard, and it may not be a feasible option. But I think if there's any way to keep the K through 5, K through 6 would be ideal, but K through 5 at the elementary schools is what I've heard from teachers, RTA, architect, and the community. Thank you.
Well, my question is if you do K through 5, but you don't want to do 6 through 8, like where do you put the 6th graders?
Yeah, that's
Where do they go?
That's why 5, 6s.
If you build a new elementary on Turn Road and add on to Clough, there is a potential to have 7 elementary schools, K through 6.
And you understand the reasons that both educators and parents are telling us that 6th grade doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
The issues that they're having with the 6th graders and developmentally.
Yeah.
I mean, like, that's what's prompted this conversation in 2019.
Well, and
Yeah.
I also think nobody wanted just the sixth grade.
By
I don't
themselves,
think
yeah,
it's
they
the
didn't
idea
want
of-
to-
I think if
There's
I
a
think if it
thing.
was between taking the sixth
Yeah.
graders and having them in an annex or keeping them in elementaries, from I'm just saying from what I've heard,
People are
this
saying-
isn't my own opinion.
For the same reason
That they would favor that.
Many of the people at this table said they didn't want their fifth graders with, and I'm just again, from all of this, the same reason that parents and teachers said to us that they didn't want fifth graders with eighth graders is the reason that parents are now saying they don't like their kindergarten, first and second graders with the sixth graders. They're seeing and hearing things in the buildings, and there's behaviors happening and stressors happening. And the difficulty that we have right now is every single one of our buildings was renovated when we were K4. So there are principals who were part of that who will tell you, Sheila Spencer, when she was at Ridge, had said, when we went back to K6, oh my God, I made my building for 10 and under. Like, even the heights of the water fountains and things like that were, and every building was done before we went back. So I totally get what you're saying, and I know why parents want to cling to that, keeping their kids, but we started this conversation because of the problems that lie with sixth, unfortunately, because kids are different than they were with us. And the RTA did vet two options, 5-8 and 5-6-7-8. And again, 80%. So that survey happened, the RTA did that amongst themselves, so.
The RTAs agreed to 2.
They
Six.
had advocated for 1-5-6.
They advocated for 1-5-6 because out of that redistricting meeting that we had, there was two options on the table. The one option that came from the discussion was 1-5-6 and then the 2-5-8s.
Yep.
So from that, with those two options, that was that. So I think that it's fair to say that not everybody loved the 5-6 idea, but out of those two options, the 5-6 was 80%.
Right, but back to what Lisa said, they definitely understand the need for K4. The emails that we've gotten from the RTA, they definitely understood the K4 need. Because if you don't get the number in the overall buildings down, it's not free rein on capital project funding for however much space you want to add. I agree, Peter's gonna try to maximize that however possible, but those aid formulas are based on a certain number of kids per square foot. So the more you can get your overall building size down, the more freedom you have to use your excess space however you want. It's not just well, we need this many more rooms to have 21 kids per classroom, so we're adding 8 rooms to every building. Like, they just don't fund that. And then you also have to think, we don't know yet, Paul brought that up, we don't know the math on the FEMA, or like you said, the architects, and because our architect has a funding specialist who comes, and I don't know if you guys saw the presentations on the last referendum, the March referendum, they bring a finance person with them too as part of their presenting. And you've also got to think about the long game of what kind of tax burden are you going to put on your community, because adding on to every building, definitely there is some outlay on, you know what I mean? It's not going to ever be 100% aided. There's going to be some type of outlay. So
So I know that, I just want to move this forward so we can all go home at some point. But, I think, when we talk about space, we keep talking about space. There's not enough space, there's not enough space. And it seems like almost, we don't know what to do with fifth, we don't know what to do with sixth. It's all these different ideas, and I like a lot of ideas. I don't think they're bad ideas. I think they're great ideas, but we go back to the same thing. I like neighborhood schools, and our community seems to love neighborhood schools. So even if we did do a 5-6, where are our kids going that went to Staley in those neighborhoods? Where's their K4? Where's their K5? Where's their neighborhood school? And that's what I want us to think about. Where is their community school, their neighborhood school? I think that's really important. Do we have enough elementary schools? And we keep going back, or are we going to put 6 with this, or are we going to put 5 with this? Do we just not have enough elementary schools? Do we need to bring Clough back so we have a neighborhood school on the east side of town? I think that's important. I think it's important that you have to be, at least at that age, and you talk about neighborhood schools, and I disagree with the Stokes. I think there's plenty of little neighborhoods, and when I talk about neighborhood school, that does not mean you have to go home and you play with your next door neighbor either. But that's who you see. Those are parents that you see. Those are parents that you get to know in your community when you're forging these relationships for your kids and you're building that. And it's important. And then when these kids go to junior high school or middle school, it's not just the kids, it's the parents that I just made relationships with. And I know in some schools it's more difficult than others, but it's giving them the opportunity for that. So, and I'll just, a lot of times, well, Ridge, it's, closing Ridge. I think we need to look at Clough and Ridge. Ridge is there, Clough is there. We've had 11 elementary schools when I was younger. Now we have so little, and now we have a space issue. And I'm not opposed, and I can see Joe's point with the 6-8. And I see what you're saying too. And I have my daughter's coming to RFA. She's gone all the way through, so I feel like I have a good lens. She went to, I had a child who went to pre-K at Clough, a child who went to pre-K at Rome Catholic, elementary school, and Stroud, and now RFA. And I see the different points of views, but it goes back to, so for me, is where is all the kids in East Rome and pushing back in South Rome? Where's their neighborhood school, their K-4 or the K-5? If we do anything, where's their starting block? And do parents really hate so much, and teachers, the K-6? I know my daughter in 6th grade was ready to go to Stroud and could go to Stroud. But if we put two options on the table, like you said, what do people really want? Is it leave our kids and we have Clough and we have a new Turn Road school and my child's in 6th grade and your kid, yes, for that 1 year is going to have to be in 6th grade and we leave it? Or would you rather, is it the 5-6 model or the put two of these or the 2 6/8? What do those look like? What John said. Put two options on the table and move forward for them. I'll never agree to banding. Our community does not like it. As much as I listen to Paul, anytime I see you, Paul, with the banding, and I get it and what Elaine is saying, I can understand why that makes sense. But for our community, it's just not the right fit. And it's not because people don't like change. I love change. I like the correct change and the right change for myself, my family, and my community. And I do think one of the things I want to look at is what does it look like to put Clough back intact and have another elementary school? Because even if we put, at first I thought we put another elementary school at Turn Road, the K-6, but then kids who are way far going all the way up, people talk about switching Ridge and Clough. Put, Ridge becomes Clough, or you have Ridge goes to Turn Road. If I'm all the way up on the lake, or I keep going, I don't want to go all the way to Clough. That's a far, ride. I think we have to start it from the center. Where are our neighborhood schools? Where are they? Who goes there? And then what's the next step? And if the second option is the 6-8, then that's the second option. I think there has to be at least two options that people can take a look at. I don't like 5-8. I think same thing as Anna and Danielle. I think the 5th graders it's 2. I think they're not ready yet. But that's where I'm at. I don't think, God forbid something happened to my house and I had to rebuild. I'm going to make sure I have everything I need. I'm going to make sure I have everything I need now, and I have everything I need hopefully in the next 5 years, or have a plan for that. And I don't think it's something that has to be rushed. And I think it's important to say, and I look forward to working with everybody in July, I think it's important to say that I think there's been different options and plans, and people are just trying to say, where are we going? What roads are we taking? And that's what I think is important, like John said, with a timeline. All of our ideas are great ideas, except banding, Paul. Sorry, that's not not that one. But we just have to come up with what does that look like, and like John said. But I do 100% want to look at what does the option look like with Clough, and if we can build on Clough, like Peter, you suggested that was a school that we could build on. And, I mean, the district office does not have to be there. I'm sure you don't love it there anyway. It's not like the nicest space we've ever seen. I mean, yes. But, I mean, do we build, you know, do you convert it back to Clough, and even if is your pre-K still there? Or I don't know what that looks like, or you know, you still have that. But I think that's just an option I would like to definitely look at more, so,
Okay, thanks, Kelly.
thanks.
It might be interesting if you took a map and drew a circle around each of the elementary schools, like a 1 mile circle around each of them, and then just look at that map. I think you'd see the circles from Ridge, Clough, Bellamy, all intersecting. You know, so what's the catchment area? You know, why is Ridge's catchment area up on the lake, like you said?
So that's one of the things I think, like, so I'm project management, that's my background. Like, looking at all of those catchment areas, like shifting north, right? Like, if Ridge is overpopulated, we know we have more space in Joy, Stokes is renovatable and expandable. Shifting north helps relieve some of that, just by moving the lines. But I agree with Kelly. I think taking care of the Staley kids, making sure obviously we all believe in neighborhood schools and making sure they have that. I think now that I don't have to go first, the other thing I think I would just say as a group is something I'm struggling with is the board trying to come up with these decisions. I know they all come from a good place, but I said this before, I really think that the decisions belong with Peter and the district, and then bringing us 2 recommendations to look at. I think they are the experts. They come with the full equipment of teams, and I think they could narrow it down based on educational experience and looking at future to give that to us. So, I mean, that's personally what I would love to see is like giving it back to the district to put it back into their hands and ultimately bringing it to us as a board to review and make a decision.
So your
Excellent
recommendation
idea. I
is we
want to see it
throw
Friday
out
morning, Peter.
everything that the consultant.
I'm just saying,
Because
Ross-
it was Peter's
Didn't have it by Friday,
recommendation
Peter?
to hire a consultant because they didn't have the
That's not what I
resources
said.
in district, I mean, like,
I'm
that's
saying
why we hired a
take
consultant.
all of the data that we now have.
the one that started with the
Peter now knows all the surveys that we have been through, but ultimately,
No, we didn't.
let it be the district that comes up with the final 2 solutions that the board vets. Or final 3, I don't know. I just think, with the exception, I think the majority of people, I think we have some educational, people in education. Myself, I was sitting on there July 1st, I am not an educational expert, never attempt or pretend to be. But the way to me that a board, good board works is advisory. So being the sounding board and reasoning.
Guys, can we let her finish talking real
I'm
quick,
sorry.
please?
So that's ultimately what I would like to recommend, but
Some of the things too is, it's hard sitting here, it's hard sitting there. We overwhelmingly heard in February that people did not like the banding. Your community said, we do not want to go forward with banding. No matter if it's the best idea or not, that is from February. And unfortunately, what happens is every time we come to a meeting, it keeps coming back up on the table, and that is why, and I know it's Ross's recommendation, I get all of that.
Yeah.
But we
yeah.
told the public it was off the table.
I have to disagree with you. Yeah, that was off the table.
Yeah.
People
We are
might
the-
bring it up
right.
because it is the best academically, but that's the only
We didn't
reason
want
why,
to.
not for us to actually consider as part of our plan.
Out
And that was
here
a long
though,
time ago.
I think when you sit and you're listening, that still seems like it's on the table. The first thing that Tanya said was, there's 2 recommendations from Ross, and this is what they are.
That's what's in there, yeah.
But, so when people keep hearing it, I think that's where kind of the disconnect is. We're like, you know, where
thought we made that clear.
It's
Actually.
why we vehemently told him at the meeting that he only gave us one option, that he needed to come back with more.
Right, I
That
heard
that
that.
wasn't acceptable. So, and it is why he made the other option his primary, and that, there's 4 options in the packet.
Right.
And that was not his primary for the same reason. So we did listen and we did advocate for that. I don't think we're gonna come to a decision, so I don't think we have anywhere else to go.
Yeah,
I
so
think you're
let's-
going back to square one, and I feel really bad.
This is like a logistical, like, state education department, one of you might know. So half of the elementary schools are in comprehensive status, and it says that if they don't improve after a certain number of years, they go into receivership with the state. Half of the elementary schools in Rome right now are in that status. How many years do you have to improve those outcomes to prevent receivership from happening?
Because of COVID, all that's unknown. They put a hold on all of that stuff. So you couldn't get on a list or off a list for the past 2 years.
And what was it before COVID? Like, how many years does a district have to
They didn't
improve
really
those
spell it
outcomes?
out for you. It was if you're not making any improvements at all. I couldn't tell you. Generally speaking, the state changes their requirements.
So when they say
Far
a number
before
of
anything
years,
else.
there's nothing specific. Okay. And the other question I have for everyone, it sounds like, and I just want to clarify, that it's kind of one of the goals that the board started with in this process, and equity was one of them. It seems like that's no longer a priority in terms of keeping, primarily, fundamentally keeping the catchment zones the way they are, whether it's K-4 or whatever the case may be. We're going to continue to see the majority of economically disadvantaged students and learning disabled students and students of color, homeless and foster students harbored into certain schools and where there's literally none.
Right,
in the
you're not
schools.
seeing equity, you're seeing privilege.
Okay,
And it's
so
disturbing.
we've given up on equity,
Whoa.
we're approaching.
If you, there is a huge difficulty if you look at decades of research. The redlining that happened with voting districts and with communities outside of education is part of the same reason that school district catchment areas were drawn, segregation. And actually, it was interesting with all of the things that happened in Texas, an article came up of anniversary things happening April 20th through the years. And obviously that was Columbine, but also that was in the 60s, a date when they mandated funding for busing, which helped to desegregate schools. It helped to give more opportunities. I've been saying this from the beginning. Paul and I have talked about this. It was one of the frustrations when I looked at the maps, and it was one of the things that I was the biggest advocate of 15 years ago when we did the proximity studies, is it did look at all of that. Because if you can stabilize all of the buildings instead of having haves and have-nots, then by the time the kids do come together, whether that's 5th, 6th, 8th, or 5th, 6th, or 7th, they have a more level playing field and they have more ability to achieve graduation. So everything that you're looking at from pre-K, right? Graduation rates don't start in 9th grade, graduation rates start in pre-K. Graduation rates start pre-K through 2, kids learn to read, and 3 through 12, they read to learn. And the overwhelming thing I hear from all of our educators is our kids can't read right now. Our kids are not literate, and the more need you have in a room, the less time teachers have to spend with the kids who need the most. So
And these approaches are not gonna fundamentally address, even if you address class size, that a 3rd grade teacher in one school is gonna have 60% of her kids either learning disabled, economically disadvantaged, or both. And the same 3rd grade teacher hired by the same district in another school is gonna have maybe 3.
and that's why grade banding continues to come up, because it does address those disparities.
And
And it's progressive, and it's it's literally throwing out the baby with the bathwater and redrawing it all. But that is why Ross came back to that plan over and over, because of how the demographics looked in this
And would
community.
you confirm, I think somebody said at one point, when you met with the teachers, Stroh in particular, I'm sorry, their biggest issue is that these 6th graders are not coming to them prepared for grade level work. Because I've just.
COVID's a huge piece of that, but we saw it in the reading data, 4th and 6th grader right now are.
Before COVID, in the archive data, right? I mean, there's literally elementary schools where there are 0 5th and 6th graders that are proficient in math. literally 8%, like what,
I want
what
to
is
clarify
this?
something about what you're talking about, just in case you write about it. Now, it needs to be stated that nobody in the district, teaching staff, myself, the board, are legally allowed to know which individual students and households
No, I get
fall on the
that.
poverty line. So when you're talking about trying to address equity in terms of financial, the poverty line equity, students, your free and reduced lunch population we are not legally allowed to use that data as a data point in saying we have 80% of the kids that in this school get free and reduced lunch, so we gotta redraw our lines to make sure that gets down. We are not supposed to be looking at that. Schools have in the past, some schools do. You're not supposed to share that information with your teachers. They're not supposed to know who qualifies for economic disadvantage.
But you do
None of
know the
that.
percentages in
You
each
have
field.
percentages,
Right.
but you're not supposed to be, when you're talking about redrawing lines, you can't redraw a line to shift the percentage if you're not drilling down to this household is and this household isn't. That's just
Well,
something that
but
we
if
should
all
be
you're
doing.
doing is redrawing lines,
Right.
I guess wanna confirm, cause I'm listening, and I've literally shed tears looking at these numbers. We're doing away with any concern with equity, and we're just gonna keep those lines essentially where they are. That's right?
I think I think you wouldn't have to necessarily, to Peter's point, look household by household at that data.
Right.
But if you know the characteristics of the community and you know the neighborhoods, then you can more equitably draw those lines. That comes from the people who know the community. We had a plan that addressed that, and if we looked back at that, the densities of populations have not changed that much, other than now we do have some new housing coming in, and that could be. And I know that's something that Joe agrees on. The one thing we probably disagree on the most with Ross's assertions is we don't think his projections for future growth are correct. So, you know.
But he's only doing it on a 5-year basis, so.
Right, but he left a couple of housing developments that are actually happening, not even in the
Yeah,
document,
but
so.
still, over the limited number of years, you're not, they're not gonna build 250.
Well, I
Well,
remember
Well,
from
who
the
thought that they were gonna
redistricting
build
meeting-
5 airloft apartments,
Right.
and they were gonna be, filled to capacity before they were even done.
Exactly.
There's gonna be 8
Nobody
total.
foresaw that.
Right.
No.
Well, the redistricting meeting at Stroud.
And to Kelly's point, a school district can't just build anywhere, you have to own that land.
Right.
And the cost to buy land is astronomical, and it's under very, 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 Peter,
And I guess I wasn't
stressing
aware
out,
we don't own
rare.
that, so we don't own that one?
We own that, but to
Oh,
her
okay.
point of, do we have enough elementary schools? The only other land that we own right now is Staley, and the conversation we've had is, it's not the most responsible choice to build in a floodplain again.
No, but
So-
I think that we need to consider it would benefit us building over there in Turner. I mean, it's gonna be tied to that building if we want.
Oh, without a doubt.
It's not.
Jeff Simons will tell you his biggest regret was not putting out a separate referendum and putting it out with a bad budget. There would be a building there right now. But, the community couldn't swallow it on a May vote in a struggling budget year, in a crisis year.
But I think overall, just sitting back and listening, I think we're more common than we think, and that there's certain options, people are really, maybe one or two people are like, yes, but I think you guys are making progress, there's more common thought than we think, and you have to just keep narrowing it down and setting your timelines, and crossing them off as we go. And I know we have a lot of the feedback from the teachers, and I appreciate that, and that weighs very heavily for me too. Appreciate the community, trust me, I'm one of the community, my own personal thoughts, but I'm not in those buildings at the end of the day, and I'm not doing it at the end of the day. So if we have to keep moving forward, I think we need to listen to the people who are doing it every single day and weigh that very heavily.
And the difficulty is, we thought we did. 4 of us, you can't have more than a quorum, so 4 of us, on behalf of the board, had a meeting with them, and we overwhelmingly, Lisa took the notes, okay? The new members can get copies of those notes. The overwhelming thing we all thought we heard in that room was, we are desperate, we can't keep going. And then when the other plan came up, that would have worked for September, they're like, wait, no!
Right.
So we were baffled. And that is the reason that we think most of us walked into the room at one of the last meetings thinking we were going.
Long-term decision, no matter if we don't have the space for the phone, we all agree on that and we all know that.
Right.
Right, and it's too late right now. Right now, that's kind of like,
Right.
Can't do anything. So I do think that, like they said, they were presented with maybe 2 options. I think that considering and looking at just, what that looks like with the elementary school, like we're saying, what the community is saying, what the community wants, kind of what, we were hearing being talked about from Kelly tonight, just maybe looking at that one additional option, narrowing it down. Like, it sounds like you guys have kind of 3 you're floating between at this point. But I just think that you guys we keep going back and forth and just cross them off the list. Grade banding, don't bring it up again. I agree, there's confusion in the community because we don't talk about it, but then we hear people say, well, I'm not gonna go for banding and I'm not this. Why are we even talking about banding anymore at all if it's off the table? Move on to the next, narrow it down to the next final group. Why are we talking about 5-8 if everybody thinks it's not a good idea? Get it off the table. Let's focus on the ones that we can and get the information on those that we can, that are on the table, and then keep moving forward from there.
Well, I think just for today, for the 5-8, it's because it's in this new plan that they gave us, so just on the record.
But I mean, like, for the aftermath of hearing it, it just
Right.
sounds like it's probably not one of the options.
Yeah, we do need to narrow down.
But it was part of our due diligence to review that final report
Yeah,
and all of those recommendations. And there are pieces, as we said tonight, if 5, 6, 7, 8 is the way we want to go, the numbers that he put for the 5-8 work. The math on that, the lines might need tweaking, but whether you have 2 5-8s and it's 1,600 kids, or a 5-6 and a 7-8 and it's the same 16, right? So the math works on that one. And we came in the room a while ago thinking that was the way we were going, so.
Well, now we're crossing it off to make agreement. So then we don't have to talk about it anymore, Bridget.
Yeah.
No, you're not, if you say banding or 5-8, you have to put it down. Just kidding.
All right, well, that seems like a good place to end.
Emails
yeah,
did
I
you
agree.
guys receive or phone calls? We know who was at what they expressed at the public meetings. How many emails on the issue have you all gotten to ask the BOE or individually, there's an idea, and are they separate cohorts from the core people that were? Like hundreds,
I don't think-
dozens?
I'd say
Because
dozens.
you bring the
Less
word
than 50.
majority and everybody, and there's 5,500 students in the
Yep.
district, and dozens is not a majority, 110 at the largest meeting is not a majority, and I just wonder if there are just a majority of silent people on there.
But how do we know? How do we tap into that?
Yeah, I'm sure there are, definitely.
So we just don't know. And
Yeah, we gotta wrap this up. Did we want to talk about a date for our reorg meeting yet, or is? Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Johnny,
meeting.
can I just say one
Yes.
thing real quick?
on or off the record? Or it doesn't matter?
On the record's fine.
Okay.
So I know I want to start this new chapter of my life with like a fresh lens, right? So there's a lot of perception of the Ridge Alliance that has been in play, and I just want to kind of give background to people. So Kelly, John, and I met 2 months ago when members of each elementary school came together about banding and what the future of this district looked like. So I know it appears as there's some Ridge Alliance, but we were all represented in the room, and we solicited across everyone, like, who wants to step up and run? I nominated myself, I was going to do it. Kelly and John followed because they felt passionate about that as well. So I would just like people to know there is no Ridge Alliance. We actually stemmed from a community group where representation from every elementary school came. And I just think that's important for you guys to know so that there's no misconception of us.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
it.
I have a comment for that. So I heard that from Cal before as well, and all I can say to that is that you can say anything, but it will all come out eventually. And that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I won't speak for them. I'm very much looking forward to getting to know each and one of you individually and building those relationships for the next 3 years, so.
Okay, it's a wrap.